Hello and welcome to National Park Wild. I'm Eric. When you think of national parks in Tanzania, the first that comes to mind is almost definitely Serengeti National Park. It's one of the most famous natural places in the world, being named one of the 7 natural wonders of Africa. The park is also the most visited in Tanzania, receiving approximately 350,000 visitors a year. It's easy to understand why the park is so well known. It has expansive landscapes and seemingly limitless wildlife. But there is another national park with similar features that gets about 3% of Serengeti's visitation. Allow me to introduce you to Mkomazi National Park. Ever heard of it? If not, I wouldn't be surprised. I hadn't heard of Mkomazi until I was in Tanzania, but my day there was remarkable, and it's among my favorite national parks I've ever been to. It has a lot of strengths you would associate with Serengeti, but also a few tricks of its own. In this video, I will chronicle and review my time in Mkomazi National Park so you can learn about Tanzania's most underrated natural wonder. First off, getting there. It's not a common safari destination. After all, it's a 5-hour drive from Arusha, the city that serves as the hub for Tanzania's northern circuit. It seems pretty long, but it should be noted that that's actually a very similar travel time for Serengeti National Park from Arusha. The reason Mkomazi is often ignored is that it's east of Arusha, while Serengeti, Tarangire, and Lake Manyara national parks, as well as Ngorongoro Crater, are all west. Therefore, getting to Mkomazi would require 10 extra hours of driving, and likely add at least 2 days to any safari if you are also going to go to Serengeti. It's more likely that people would choose to go to Mkomazi specifically for that park, and that's what I did. Starting from Weka, a town at the foot of Mount Kilimanjaro that's 4 hours from Mkomazi's entrance, I arrived in the mid-afternoon one day and left the next afternoon. When arriving, the first thing to stand out to me was the landscape. For comparison, Serengeti National Park is widely flat woodland, with some large rocky hills known as kopjes scattered around. Mkomazi is not quite the same. There is certainly plenty of woodland, and you can still find the acacia trees and water sources reminiscent of Serengeti, but you can also find mountains. The Usambara and Pare mountain ranges run through this park, and the peaks here can rise up to 1,600 meters or 5,250 feet. And while that's not nearly as high as something like Kilimanjaro, the mountains are still lush, grand, and downright beautiful. These peaks are such a nice contrast to the flat lands that you see while driving around the park. And these mountains frankly reminded me a bit of Pinnacles National Park in California. Unfortunately, a key difference between these parks is that Mkomazi has very few hiking trails. That's a common theme in Tanzania's parks because of the very abundant dangerous wild animals, and for Mkomazi specifically, the park only recently earned its status. Still, driving around the mountains is quite a treat. The mountains cradle woodland, ponds, and wildlife. You can even see animals among the trees a little ways up these mountains. And speaking of animals, the wildlife of Mkomazi is spectacular. You might think that the variety and quantity of wildlife couldn't compare to Serengeti, and you're not entirely wrong. There were few to no wildebeest when I went after all. However, I was amazed at how much wildlife I saw during game drives here. The number of giraffes I saw during one day here might even outmatch the number I saw in 4 days in Serengeti. I'm sure I saw more than 100 while here. The same goes for zebras and eland, but that's not nearly all. There were dozens of elephants around the park, vervet monkeys all over the place where I stayed, and several Cape buffalo. To briefly list some other mammals I saw, there were hartebeest, impala, dik-dik, and olive baboons. One of my friends even saw a serval, which is a small cat species, running across the road. Another animal that stood out to me was the oryx, an antelope species that I hadn't seen elsewhere in Tanzania. It's a lot of fun to look at with its long angled horns and striped face. But the fun doesn't stop at these mammals. There's also a variety of remarkable birds in the park, such as ostriches, hornbills, parrots, crested eagles, and the lilac-breasted roller. That last one's my personal favorite, with an especially unique and vibrant color scheme. The one other main animal I have to mention is the leopard tortoise. A medium-sized tortoise is a member of Tanzania's Small Five. These are 5 small species of animal whose names contain the names of Tanzania's Big Five of elephants, rhino, buffalo, lion, and leopard. So that summarizes what I saw during the game drives, but there are 2 other animal species you can see here that must be mentioned. Mkomazi is perhaps most renowned as a sanctuary for 2 endangered mammal species. First is the African wild dog. This is a remarkable species with similarities to the wolf, not only as a canid, but also as an animal that hunts in packs and chases down prey until the prey gets tired. There were an estimated 500,000 African wild dogs at the turn of the 21st century, but in 2020, there were an estimated 6,600. The IUCN has listed wild dogs as endangered since 1990, but Mkomazi is working to combat that issue with a captive breeding program. The program began in 1995 with 25 puppies as East Africa's first ever captive breeding program. This program led to the introduction of hundreds of wild dogs into Tanzania's national parks. There are no free-roaming wild dogs in Mkomazi, but the captive ones are raised to be introduced into the wilderness with the same hunting and social abilities as those that were always there. Learning about these unique animals and watching them feed so effectively was fascinating. While getting to see more common animals out and about is a lot of fun, getting to see an environmental project in the works is one more reason why Mkomazi is such an interesting place. Besides, there is another endangered species you're likely to come across here. The black rhinoceros is likely the most famous endangered species in Tanzania, if not the whole world. Like the wild dog, there are estimated to be less than 7,000 wild black rhinos, but this population is a notable increase from the less than 3,000 in 1995. Within Mkomazi, you can find a sanctuary for the black rhino, specifically the subspecies known as the eastern black rhino. There's approximately 170 eastern black rhinos in Tanzania, and close to 30% of them live in the Mkomazi sanctuary. The rhino sanctuary is an enclosed area of 21 square miles within the national park. The rhinos are fenced in, so it's not a strictly wild rhino viewing. Still, the experience of seeing them is wonderful. One enters the sanctuary in a special vehicle that the rhinos are familiar with. You'll definitely see around a half dozen rhinos, some of which are currently juveniles, and on top of that, the preserve is home to zebras, eland, ground squirrels, and other Tanzanian wildlife. I certainly saw some notable bird life here. The one major concern during a tour of the sanctuary, though, is that you will have to avoid the whistling thorn acacia. This tree is full of thorns and it grows over the road. The chances of you getting slapped in the face with a spiky branch are close to 100 if you're not aware of it. The guides will not warn you of the trees, so you just have to be careful or sit in a middle seat. This is a bit scary, but it's nice to know how untouched the rhino sanctuary is. It's in a beautiful location, allowing the rhinos to roam around, and it features a hospital to care for ill rhinos. The black rhinos of Mkomazi are certainly well protected. So that sums up my experiences in Mkomazi National Park. I ogled at impressive landscapes, had numerous wildlife encounters, and learned about endangered species rehabilitation. While Serengeti does have more impressive herds of wildlife, especially during the Great Migration when I first went, Mkomazi almost matches the majesty of Africa's most famous national park thanks to its forested mountains, prominent populations of less often seen species, and its endangered species programs. It is obvious why the park is often ignored on safaris. It's newer, it's less developed, there are fewer accommodations, and it's very out of the way compared to most in the Northern Circuit. However, I think the different scenery, wildlife, and conservation programs make Mkomazi very much worth a visit if you can add it to your safari itinerary. And that's not all there is to say about Mkomazi. If you want me to talk about how to plan a trip to the park, or the park's interesting history, let me know in the comments below. That's all for now, so thank you for watching, stay tuned for more Tanzania videos, I'll see you next time.